Sir, I already told you, that seat is no longer available.
Funny. My boarding pass says otherwise.
We reassigned it to a priority passenger. You need to move now.
So the man with money keeps the seat, and the black man gets pushed to economy?
Don't make this into something it isn't.
Too late. You already did that the second you decided I didn't belong here.
If you refuse to cooperate, I'll call security.
Go ahead, and when this plane lands, make sure you remember my name.
What would you do if the seat you paid thousands of dollars for was taken right in front of you, and every single person around you acted like you never belonged there in the first place? The cabin went quiet before anyone said a word. Not silent, just thinner, like the air had been pulled tight across the first-class aisle, ready to snap. Ethan Blake didn't move at first. One hand rested on the armrest. The other held his boarding pass, still warm from the scanner. Seat 2A window, exactly where he had planned to sit for the next 3 hours. Exactly where he needed to be. Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside. The voice was controlled, polished, practiced. Sarah Mitchell stood beside him, posture straight, smile fixed just enough to pass as polite. But her eyes had already decided. Ethan looked up slowly. Step aside? His voice was calm. Too calm. Behind her, a man in an expensive navy suit waited. Mid-50s, silver hair. Gold watch, catching the cabin light every time he checked the time, like the seconds themselves belonged to him. Richard Coleman didn't even look at Ethan. Not really. Just a glance, a dismissal. I believe that's my seat, Richard said, already sliding his leather briefcase into the overhead bin. No hesitation, no question, just ownership. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly on the boarding pass. That's interesting, he said quietly. Because I paid for it. A pause. Not long. Just enough for the people nearby to start noticing. A woman across the aisle lowered her magazine. A man 2 rows back stopped mid-sentence. Someone shifted in their seat. The small sounds of discomfort began to ripple. Sarah exhaled through her smile. Sir, we have a situation with a priority passenger. We've reassigned your seat. If you could just follow me, we'll get you settled in another section. Another section, not another seat, not an upgrade, not even the same cabin. Ethan blinked once. Slow. And what section would that be? Sarah hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Then recovered. Economy. The word landed heavier than it should have. Richard was already seated now, adjusting the headrest, crossing one leg over the other like he'd done this 100 times before. Like this was routine. Like people like Ethan always moved. Ethan didn't. I'm not moving. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The tension snapped tighter. A man near the aisle shook his head under his breath. Another passenger reached for her phone, thumb hovering just above the screen. Waiting. Sarah's smile faded. Sir, she said, voice dropping, you can either cooperate, or we'll have to escalate this. Escalate. Ethan let the word hang. He turned slightly, just enough to look around the cabin. Faces, watching, measuring, deciding, some curious, some uncomfortable, some already convinced they knew how this would end. He had seen this look before. Boardrooms, elevators, hotel lobbies, the quiet calculation, the unspoken question. Does he belong here? Ethan inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that settles something deep inside, not outside. Before we escalate anything, he said, voice steady, I need your name. Sarah blinked. My name? "And your supervisor's name," Ethan added, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Because I want to make sure we're all very clear about what's happening here." That's when it shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Sarah's shoulders stiffened. Just a little. Her eyes flicked to the phone, then to Ethan. Then back to Richard, who now sat watching with faint irritation, as if the delay itself was the real offense. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be," she said. Ethan met her gaze. "No," he said quietly. "You already did that." And somewhere in the cabin, a camera started recording. Richard Coleman leaned back into the seat, as if the conversation was already over, fingers adjusting his cufflinks with slow, deliberate precision. "Look," he muttered, not even turning his head, "I fly this route every month. That seat's always mine." His tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the quiet confidence of someone who had never been told no. Ethan watched him for a second, not with anger. Not yet. Just observation, the kind that measured everything without reacting. The gold watch, the polished shoes, the ease, the assumption. "I don't care how often you fly," Ethan said. "That doesn't make it yours." A few heads turned more openly now. The air had shifted. This wasn't going away quietly. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Sir, we're trying to handle this professionally." Ethan let out a soft breath. "Then start by treating me like I paid to be here." That landed. A man across the aisle cleared his throat, glancing between them. A woman in the second row leaned slightly into the aisle, pretending to adjust her bag. But her phone was already angled just enough. Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I need you to cooperate. You're holding up boarding." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "No." "You are." Silence. Richard sighed loudly, finally turning to look at Ethan fully for the first time. His eyes scanned him from head to toe. Casual jacket, no tie, no visible logos. He smirked faintly. "You're really going to make a scene over a seat?" Ethan didn't blink. "I'm not the one who took it." A ripple moved through the cabin. Subtle, but there. Richard chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "Unbelievable." Sarah straightened, her tone sharpening now. "Sir, if you don't step aside immediately, I will have to call security. This is your final warning." Final warning. The words echoed heavier than they should have. Ethan's grip on his phone tightened slightly. His thumb hovered over the screen. Not nervous. Not rushed. Just precise. Around him, the atmosphere thickened. People weren't pretending anymore. They were watching. Waiting. Judging. A man near the window whispered to his wife, too low to hear clearly. But the look said enough. Trouble. Always trouble. Ethan caught it. He had spent years learning how to read rooms like this. The shift in posture, the silent alliances forming, the way authority leaned in one direction before a single fact was confirmed. He looked back at Sarah. "Go ahead," he said calmly. "Call whoever you need." That wasn't the response she expected. Her eyes flickered. "Just for a second." "You think this is a game?" she asked. Ethan's voice dropped, quieter now, but sharper. "No. I think you've already decided how this ends." That hit something deeper than the words. For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Not visibly. Not enough for most people to notice. But it was there. A crack. Richard leaned forward slightly, irritation creeping in. "This is ridiculous. I have a meeting in Dallas in 3 hours. I don't have time for this. Ethan turned his head slowly toward him. Then maybe you should sit in the seat you paid for. Richard's face tightened. The smile disappeared. Sarah exhaled sharply, stepping back. Her hand moved to the small device clipped at her waist. Gate, we need assistance in first class. Passenger refusing to comply. There it was. The line crossed. A murmur spread through the cabin. Phones lifted higher now. No more hiding. Ethan didn't move, didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, still holding his boarding pass. Seat 2A. The paper slightly creased now from the pressure of his fingers. And somewhere beneath the tension, beneath the whispers, beneath the weight of eyes pressing in from every direction, something else began to build. Not anger, not fear. Something colder, more controlled, like a decision that had all wool. Ready. Been made. Ethan glanced down at his phone, then back up. Good, he said quietly. Let's make this official. The footsteps came fast down the aisle, firm, authoritative, not rushed, but urgent enough to carry weight. Conversations died mid-sentence as a man in a dark uniform stepped into first class, his presence pulling attention like gravity. David Reynolds, mid-40s, sharp jaw, eyes already scanning the scene before anyone spoke. What's going on here? His voice was controlled, but it carried. Sarah turned immediately, relief flickering across her face. This passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions. We reassigned his seat to accommodate a priority guest, and I didn't refuse anything, Ethan cut in, calm but precise. I asked why I'm being moved from the seat I paid for. David's gaze shifted to Ethan. It lingered a second longer than necessary, taking in details, clothes, posture, tone. Then he looked at Richard, already settled comfortably in seat 2A. Sir, David said to Ethan, can I see your boarding pass? Ethan handed it over without hesitation. David glanced down. Seat 2A. First class. Confirmed. A small pause, the kind that shouldn't mean anything, but did. Sarah stepped in quickly. There was a system issue. Mr. Coleman is one of our top clients. He flies with us every week. We needed to accommodate. David raised a hand slightly. Not aggressive, just enough to stop her. He looked back at Ethan. Did anyone explain the situation to you? Ethan held his gaze. Yes. They told me to move. Another pause. Richard shifted in his seat, impatience now visible. Look, can we not drag this out? This is a simple fix. Move him. We're done. Simple. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. David exhaled slowly, weighing something. The cabin was watching him now. Every movement, every word. Phones still raised, recording. He knew this kind of moment, the kind that looked Saul until it wasn't. Sir, David said carefully, we're trying to avoid further delay. If we can get you seated somewhere else temporarily, we can sort this out after boarding. Temporarily. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. So you're asking me to give up my seat? Without explanation, without correction. Just move. David didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't a good answer. Behind him, Sarah shifted her weight, tension creeping into her posture. She wasn't in control anymore, not fully. A woman across the aisle spoke up, voice steady but firm. He showed his ticket. Why is he the one being moved? Heads turned. David glanced towards her, then back at Ethan. The pressure was building now. Not just inside the cabin. Outside. Social. Legal. Visible. Richard leaned forward again, irritation sharper now. Because this is how it works. Loyalty matters. Some people earn certain privileges. Ethan turned to him slowly. And some people pay for what they get. Silence. The kind that settles heavy. David looked down at the boarding pass again, then back at Ethan. Something in his expression shifted. Not fully, but enough to suggest doubt. "Mr. Blake, is it?" he asked. Ethan nodded once. David handed the pass back. "I understand your frustration." "That's not frustration," Ethan said quietly. "That's clarity." The words landed harder than they sounded. Sarah's patience snapped. "We don't have time for this. He's being difficult." Ethan didn't look at her. "No, I'm being documented." That caught David's attention. "Documented?" he repeated. Ethan lifted his phone slightly, not aggressively, just enough. Every word, every decision. A flicker of unease crossed David's face, because now it wasn't just a disagreement. It was evidence. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, tighter, like the walls had leaned in just enough to trap the moment inside. David straightened slightly, voice more measured now. "Sir, I need you to understand." "No," Ethan interrupted, still calm, still controlled. "I need you to understand something. That shift. Subtle, but undeniable." The balance had started to move, not visibly. Not yet. But it was there. Ethan slipped his phone fully into his hand, thumb moving across the screen with quiet precision. His gaze didn't leave David's. "You're about to make a decision," he said. "And that decision is going to follow you a lot further than this flight." No one spoke. Not Sarah. Not Richard. Not even the passengers. Because something had changed. And for the first time since this started, David Reynolds wasn't sure which side he was standing on anymore. The silence didn't break. It stretched. Tight. Uncomfortable. The kind that forces people to choose a side without saying a word. David Reynolds felt it first. Not in the noise. In the absence of it. Every eye in first class was locked on him now. Waiting. Measuring. Recording. Not just with phones, but with memory. He cleared his throat, subtle, but enough to reclaim the space. "Mr. Blake," he said, tone steadier now. "No one is trying to disrespect you." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He studied David. Not his words, his posture, his hesitation, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his authority had just slipped. Then Ethan spoke. "You already did. No anger, no volume, just fact." Behind David, Sarah shifted again, her composure cracking at the edges. "This is getting out of hand," she snapped. "He's turning this into something it's not." Ethan's eyes moved to her. Slow. Deliberate. "What exactly is it, then?" Sarah opened her mouth, then stopped. Because whatever answer she had didn't sound right anymore. Not out loud, not with cameras rolling, not with witnesses thinking. Richard scoffed, breaking the tension with a sharp exhale. "This is absurd. Are we seriously entertaining this?" He gestured loosely toward Ethan, like pointing directly would give the moment too much weight. "Move him or remove him. It's not complicated." There it was. Clear. Clean. Ugly. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. One man near the aisle looked down, suddenly interested in his watch. Another woman, tightened her grip on her phone, her expression hardening. David turned toward Richard, something flickering behind his eyes. Not agreement. Not quite. "Sir," David said, voice controlled, "we're handling the situation." Richard leaned back, unimpressed. "Then handle it." The words hung there. Heavy. Ethan watched the exchange without moving, without reacting. But inside, something had settled, not rising anymore, not building. Set. He glanced down at his phone again. The screen lit briefly. A name. A connection already open. He didn't press it yet. Not yet. David turned back to Ethan, lowering his voice slightly. "Mr. Blake, let's resolve this without escalation. I'm asking you one more time. Would you be willing to step aside so we can depart on time?" There it was again. The ask. Packaged differently. Same outcome. Ethan's lips pressed together for a second. Then he nodded once. "All right." The word caught everyone off guard. Even Sarah. Even Richard. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, stepping back just enough to clear the aisle. A ripple moved through the cabin. Relief. Tension easing. Shoulders dropping. The kind of quiet release people don't realize they're holding. Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been keeping. "Thank you," she said quickly, already turning slightly as if to move things forward. But Ethan didn't move away. He stayed right there, blocking just enough. "Before I go," he said calmly, "I want your full name." Sarah froze. "And your employee ID," Ethan added. The relief vanished. Just like that. David's eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir?" "That's not necessary." "It is now." Ethan's voice didn't change, but something in it did. Final. Controlled. Unavoidable. Richard sat forward again, irritation flashing. "This is ridiculous. You got what you wanted. Move on." Ethan turned his head just enough to meet his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "You got what you wanted." A beat. Then Ethan lifted his phone, and this time he pressed the call. The line connected almost instantly. A voice came through. Clear. Professional. Alert. "Good evening, Mr. Blake." Everything stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Sarah's face drained of color. David's posture stiffened. Even Richard blinked. Ethan didn't raise his voice. "Didn't need to. I need you to stay on the line," he said, eyes still on David. "And I need you to listen carefully." A pause. Then colder now. "Because what's happening on this aircraft is about to become your problem." And somewhere in the background, another phone started ringing. No one spoke. Not because they didn't have anything to say, but because something bigger had just entered the room. David Reynolds felt it before he understood it. That voice on the phone, the tone, the way it said, "Mr. Blake," not casually, not politely, precisely, respectfully, carefully. Ethan didn't move his gaze from David. "I'm on flight from Phoenix to Dallas," he said into the phone, calm, measured, first class, seat 2A. "And I've just been asked to give up my seat for someone who decided they wanted it more." A pause on the line. Not confusion. Processing. "I understand, sir," the voice replied, sharper now. More alert. "Do you need me to escalate this immediately?" That word again. Escalate. But this time, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like power. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly toward Sarah, then to David. "Yes," he said. "I do." Sarah's hand tightened around the tablet she was holding. The plastic creaked slightly under her grip. David stepped forward half an inch. "Sir, there's no need to involve." Ethan lifted a finger. Not aggressive, not dramatic. But it stopped him. "Stay with me," Ethan said into the phone. Then after a beat, quieter, colder, "I want the head of customer relations looped in. And I want this call recorded. A shift. Immediate." David's chest rose slightly. Slower now. Measured. Because this was no longer internal. This was documented. Accountable. Permanent. Behind them, a faint murmur spread. Low voices, quick whispers, words like lawsuit, discrimination, viral flickering through the air like sparks. Richard shifted in his seat again, this time not as comfortable. His fingers tapped once against the armrest, then stopped. "What is this?" he muttered, not as confident now. "Who exactly are you calling?" Ethan didn't answer him. He didn't need to. The answer was already forming in the room. The voice on the phone came back, firmer now. "Sir, I have the director joining in less than 30 seconds. Do you want me to notify executive operations as well?" David's head turned sharply toward the phone. Executive operations. That wasn't standard. That wasn't routine. That was high level. Ethan's expression didn't change. "Yes," he said. "Do that." Sarah took a step back. Just one. But it was enough. Her confidence gone. Replaced with something else. Uncertainty. Fear. Because the script she had been following didn't account for this. David straightened fully now, voice lower, more careful. "Mr. Blake, let's take a moment here. We can resolve this without—" Ethan looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, David saw it. Not anger, not ego. Control. The kind that doesn't raise its voice, because it doesn't have to. "No," Ethan said quietly. "We're past that." A second line clicked in. Another voice joined. Older. Sharper. Tighter. "This is Karen Holt, Director of Customer Relations. Who am I speaking with?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "This is Ethan Blake." Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. Immediate. Absolute. David felt it hit before anyone said a word, like pressure dropping in a sealed room. Karen's voice changed. Completely. "Mr. Blake, I'm very sorry to hear there's an issue. Can you tell me exactly what's happening?" Ethan's gaze never left David. "I already did," he said. "And now I want to hear what you're going to do about it." Behind him, someone's phone camera zoomed in. Closer. Capturing everything. Because the story had just changed, and everyone in that cabin knew it. They just didn't know how big it was yet. Karen Holt didn't answer right away, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she knew exactly who she was speaking to, and that changed everything. "Mr. Blake," she said, voice steady but unmistakably tighter, "I need you to confirm something for me. Are you currently on board the aircraft?" Ethan didn't blink. "Yes." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Understood," Karen replied. "Please stay exactly where you are." The words weren't a suggestion. They were a command. David Reynolds felt it land in his chest like weight. His posture shifted instinctively, shoulders tightening, jaw setting. Something had just moved far above his level, and it was coming down fast. "What's going on?" Richard muttered, louder now, the edge of irritation creeping back in, but thinner, less certain. "Why are we still standing here?" No one answered him, because he was no longer the center of this moment. Ethan lowered the phone slightly, but didn't end the call. Karen stayed on the line, silent now, listening, documenting. Sarah tried to recover. She stepped forward, forcing her voice back into something resembling authority. "Sir, we need to proceed with boarding. If you could just—" Ethan turned his head. That was all it took. She stopped mid-sentence, because something in his eyes told her this was no longer her situation to control. David stepped in, quieter now, more measured. "Mr. Blake, let's de-escalate this. We can reseat Mr. Coleman. We can." Ethan cut him off with a single word. "No." Not loud, not harsh. Final. David froze. Behind them, the cabin had shifted again. The earlier tension hadn't disappeared. It had evolved. People weren't just watching now. They were understanding. Slowly. Piece by piece. A man in the third row leaned toward his wife, whispering something urgent. She nodded, eyes wide, phone still raised. Another passenger lowered his head, typing quickly, likely sending the story out into the world. Because it was already bigger than this plane. Karen's voice came back, sharper now. "Mr. Blake, Executive Operations has been notified. I have the Vice President joining in less than 1 minute. I need you to confirm, were you asked to leave a seat you purchased?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." "And were you given a valid explanation?" "No." A beat. "And is another passenger currently occupying that seat?" Ethan glanced at Richard. Still sitting there, still trying to hold on to something that was slipping. "Yes," Ethan said. Karen exhaled slowly. Not frustration. Containment. Understood. That word again. Understood. But now it carried consequence. Richard shifted again, this time more visibly. His confidence was cracking. "This is insane," he said, louder, looking around as if searching for agreement. "All this over a seat?" No one backed him. Not anymore. Ethan looked at him for a long second, then back to David. "This was never about the seat," he said quietly. David didn't respond, because now he knew, or at least he was starting to. Another click on the line. A new voice entered. Deeper. Controlled. Used to authority. "This is Michael Grant, Vice President of Operations. Mr. Blake, I've just been briefed. I need you to walk me through exactly what happened from the moment you boarded." Ethan didn't look away from David. "You want the short version?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Ethan's voice dropped slightly. Slower now. Sharper. "I boarded with a valid first-class ticket. Sat in my assigned seat. Was told to move without explanation. My seat was given to another passenger, and when I asked why, I was threatened with removal." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Michael didn't respond immediately, because there was nothing to question, nothing unclear, only one thing left. Action. Ethan lifted the phone slightly, his grip steady. "And now," he said, eyes locked on David, "we're all going to see what your company does next." And for the first time since this started, no one in that cabin felt in control anymore. Michael Grant didn't hesitate this time. "Mr. Blake, I'm going to handle this personally. Please remain where you are. No one is to move you. Is that understood?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He let the words hang in the air, long enough for everyone in that cabin to hear them. Then he said, "Understood." That single word shifted the balance completely. David Reynolds felt it like a door slamming shut behind him. His authority, just minutes ago unquestioned, now felt borrowed, temporary, fragile. He turned slightly towards Sarah, lowering his voice. "Step back," he muttered. She didn't argue. Not this time. She took 2 small steps back, her tablet now held against her chest like a shield. Her eyes kept flicking to Ethan's phone, then away, as if looking too long might make this more real. Richard exhaled sharply, trying to reclaim ground that was already gone. "This is unbelievable," he said, louder than necessary. "I've been a platinum member for 8 years. I spend over $100,000 a year with this airline." No one responded. Not Sarah, not David, not even the passengers who, minutes ago, might have nodded along. Ethan turned his head slightly toward him. "And I paid for that seat," he said, "just like everyone else here paid for theirs." Richard scoffed, but the sound lacked weight. "You don't understand how this works." Ethan's eyes held his. "No. You don't." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was decisive. Karen's voice returned, controlled but urgent. "Mr. Blake, we've initiated a full review of the situation. I need you to confirm the names of the crew involved." Ethan didn't look at Sarah directly. He didn't need to. She introduced herself as Sarah Mitchell, he said. "And the supervisor here is David Reynolds." David's throat tightened. Not because his name was spoken. Because of how it was spoken. Recorded. Logged. Permanent. Michael's voice cut back in, sharper now. "David, are you on the line?" David straightened instinctively. "Yes, sir." The shift in tone was immediate. No longer conversational. Command structure, clear, cold. Why was a confirmed first-class passenger asked to vacate his seat? David opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "There was a request from another high-value customer, and That's not what I asked." The interruption was clean, precise. David swallowed. "We made a judgment call to accommodate. You made the wrong call. No hesitation, no buffer, just fact." The words hit harder than anything said so far. David's shoulders dropped half an inch, not visibly to most, but enough. Michael continued. "Mr. Blake's seat is to be restored immediately. The other passenger will return to his assigned seat. Is that clear?" David nodded, then caught himself. "Yes, sir." "Good," Michael said. "And David, stay where you are. We're not done." The line went quiet again, but not empty. Charged. David turned slowly toward Richard. For the first time since this started, he didn't look confident. "Sir," David said carefully, "I'm going to need you to return to your assigned seat." Richard stared at him. Didn't move. "You're kidding," he said. David didn't blink. "No, sir. A beat." Richard laughed once, short, disbelieving. "After all this, you're just going to reverse it?" David held his gaze. "Yes." Another beat. Longer. Then Richard looked around, really looked, at the phones, at the faces, at the shift, and for the first time, he understood. He stood up, slowly, adjusted his jacket, picked up his briefcase. No apology, no acknowledgement, just movement. He stepped into the aisle, brushing past Ethan without a word. But Ethan didn't move either. Didn't step back. Didn't give space. Their shoulders nearly touched as Richard passed. And in that brief moment, the power dynamic flipped completely. Ethan turned slightly, watching him walk down the aisle toward a seat that had always been his. Seat 2C. where he should have been from the start. Then Ethan looked back at David. Calm. Still. Controlled. "We're not done," he said. And this time, David knew he was right. No one clapped. No one spoke. But the shift was undeniable. The cabin felt different now. Heavier, quieter, sharper. Like everyone had just witnessed something they wouldn't forget. Ethan stepped forward and sat back down in seat 2A. Slow, deliberate. He placed his boarding pass on the armrest, smoothing it flat with his fingers, as if restoring order to something that had been disturbed. His shoulders relaxed slightly, but his eyes didn't. They stayed fixed ahead, focused, controlled. David remained standing in the aisle, waiting. Because he knew this wasn't over. Michael's voice returned, colder now, stripped of any courtesy. "David, I want a full account, every detail, starting now." David inhaled slowly. "Yes, sir. The situation began during boarding. Mitchell identified a conflict involving seat assignment and—" "Stop," Michael said. "Was there an actual system error?" David hesitated. That was enough. "No," he admitted. A quiet ripple moved through the cabin. Not loud, but present. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "So you knowingly displaced a confirmed passenger without cause?" David's jaw tightened. "We were attempting to accommodate a high-value client." "That's not policy," Michael replied. "It was a judgment call. It was a violation." The word cut clean. Final. David's eyes lowered for half a second. Behind him, Sarah stood frozen, her breathing shallow. Her fingers pressed tightly against the edge of her tablet. She wasn't looking at Ethan anymore. She couldn't. Karen's voice came back in, steady but firm. "Mr. Blake, on behalf of the company, I want to formally apologize for what you experienced. This should never have happened." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He let the apology sit, measured it. Then he said, "You're apologizing because I made a call." Karen paused. Because that was true. And everyone knew it. Ethan leaned back slightly in his seat, his voice calm, but heavier now. If I hadn't said anything, if I had just moved, what would have happened? No one answered. Not Karen, not Michael, not David, not Sarah. Because they all knew the answer. Nothing. Ethan nodded once. That's the problem. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't undershorten. It was understood. Michael spoke next, voice tighter. "Mr. Blake, corrective action is already being initiated. The crew involved will be removed from duty pending investigation. This will not be ignored." David's head lifted slightly. That word. Removed. It landed differently when it was directed at you. Sarah's breath caught. Just barely. But enough. Ethan turned his head slowly, looking at her for the first time since sitting back down. Not angry. Not harsh. Just direct. "Do you remember what you said to me?" he asked. Sarah's lips parted. No sound came out. "You told me I was making this difficult," Ethan continued. A pause, then quieter. "But this was always going to be difficult. For someone." Sarah's eyes dropped. Because now, it was her. A phone camera zoomed in from across the aisle, capturing her expression. The shift. The realization. David cleared his throat, forcing himself back into the moment. "Mr. Blake, we truly regret." Ethan raised his hand slightly. David stopped. I'm not interested in rehearsed lines, Ethan said. I'm interested in change. Karen responded immediately. You have my word. There will be... No, Ethan interrupted. Softer now, but sharper. Not words. Action. Another pause. Then Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. His voice dropped, lower, more controlled. Because this isn't about me. He glanced briefly around the cabin, at the people watching, recording, listening. This is about every person who's been told they don't belong, in a place they earned. The words didn't echo. They settled. Deep. Permanent. And for the first time, no one in that cabin looked away. The engines hadn't even started, but the story was already moving faster than the plane ever would. Phones stayed up. Screens glowed. Messages flew. Names were being typed, searched, shared. The moment had escaped the cabin. Ethan sat still in seat 2A, hands resting lightly on his knees, breathing even. He wasn't looking at anyone now. Not David. Not Sarah. Not Richard. His focus had shifted beyond them. David felt it. The realization that this was no longer contained, no longer fixable with a quiet apology or a reassigned seat. Michael's voice broke through again, colder, more procedural now. David, step off the aircraft, immediately. The words landed like a verdict. David didn't argue. He nodded once. Yes, sir. His voice was lower now, stripped of authority. He turned slightly, avoiding Ethan's gaze as he stepped back toward the front of the cabin. Each step felt heavier than the last. The aisle that once belonged to him now felt like a corridor out. Sarah didn't move at first. She stood, frozen. Then Karen spoke, calm but firm. Ms. Mitchell, you are also to be relieved from this flight. Security will meet you at the gate. Sarah blinked. Once, twice, like her body hadn't caught up yet. I was following protocol, she said, barely above a whisper. No one answered. Because now, protocol had a different meaning. Ethan didn't look at her. He didn't need to. The truth had already done its work. Sarah swallowed, her grip loosening on the tablet as if it no longer mattered. She turned slowly, stepping away from the aisle, each movement smaller than before. Controlled. Quiet. But hollow. Behind her, a passenger murmured, "Wow," under their breath. Another voice followed, sharper. That's what happens? The cabin didn't react loudly. It didn't celebrate. But the shift was complete. Richard sat in seat 2C now, staring straight ahead. His hands rested stiffly on his legs. The confidence was gone, replaced by something tighter, smaller. He avoided eye contact. With everyone. Especially Ethan. A woman across the aisle lowered her phone slightly, then raised it again, adjusting the angle. She wasn't just recording anymore. She was documenting something that felt important. Ethan finally leaned back into his seat. Slow, measured. The leather adjusted beneath him with a soft creak. For the first time since this began, he allowed himself a breath that wasn't controlled. Not relief, not victory. Just release. Karen's voice softened slightly. Mr. Blake, a formal report is being filed. We will also be issuing a public statement regarding this incident. You have our full attention. Ethan nodded once, though she couldn't see it. You should, he said quietly. A pause. Then Michael spoke again, more deliberate now. Mr. Blake, we would also like to arrange a direct conversation with you after landing. There are broader discussions that need to happen. Ethan's eyes shifted slightly toward the window. The reflection staring back at him wasn't tense anymore. It was resolved. "We'll talk," he said. Outside, ground crew moved along the tarmac, unaware of what had just unfolded inside the aircraft. To them, it was just another delay. Another flight waiting for clearance. Inside, it was something else entirely. David and Sarah had disappeared from view now. Gone. Just like that. The system had corrected itself. Or at least it was trying to. Ethan glanced once more around the cabin. At the faces, the phones, the silence that had turned into understanding. Then he looked forward again. Seat 2A. Exactly where he had always been meant to be. And this time, no one questioned it. The plane finally pushed back from the gate, slow and steady, as if nothing had happened. But inside that cabin, everything had changed. The engines roared to life, a low vibration building beneath the floor, rising through the seats, through the bones of everyone on board. Conversations didn't return. Not fully. Voices stayed low. Controlled. People kept glancing up, then away, like they were still processing something bigger than a delay. Ethan sat by the window, eyes fixed on the runway lights stretching into the distance. One after another, glowing lines leading forward. Predictable. Ordered. Nothing like what had just unfolded. Across the aisle, the woman with the phone finally lowered it. She looked at Ethan for a brief moment. Not curiosity. Not judgment. Respect. He gave a small nod. Nothing more. Richard remained silent in seat 2C. His posture stiff, his gaze locked ahead. The man who had walked in like he owned the space now looked like a passenger trying not to be seen. His gold watch no longer caught the light the same way. It just sat there. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. Take off. The force pressed everyone back into their seats as the aircraft accelerated. A deep, steady push. No turning back now. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Not to escape. To settle. Because moments like this didn't end when the plane lifted off. They carried forward. Into boardrooms. Into policies. Into decisions that affected people who would never sit in seat 2A. His phone buzzed softly in his hand. A message. Then another. Then several more. News alerts. Internal emails. Names he recognized. Names that mattered. He glanced down briefly. The story was already out. Clips, headlines, words like discrimination, accountability, corporate response flashing across the screen. It had moved beyond him, exactly where it needed to go. Ethan locked his phone and set it on the tray table. Still, grounded. He wasn't smiling. This wasn't a win. It was a correction. A necessary one. A reminder that systems don't change because they want to. They change because someone forces them to face what they've ignored. A flight attendant approached slowly from the front. Not Sarah. Someone else. Younger. Careful. "Mr. Blake," she said quietly, placing a glass on his tray. "Can I get you anything else?" Her voice carried something different. Awareness. Ethan looked up at her. "No," he said. Then after a brief pause, softer. "Thank you." She nodded and stepped away. Simple. Respectful. The way it should have been from the start. Outside the window, the city lights faded into darkness as the plane climbed higher. The noise leveled out. The cabin settled. But the weight of what had happened didn't fade. It stayed. In the silence. In the memory. in the recordings that would keep replaying long after this flight landed. Ethan leaned back, eyes forward, posture steady. Seat 2A. Not just a seat. A line that had been drawn, and this time it hadn't been crossed quietly. Somewhere behind him, a passenger whispered, "That changed something." They were right. It did. And stories like this don't end when the plane lands. They continue in every place where someone is judged before they're known, dismissed before they're heard, moved before they're asked. Ethan didn't say another word. He didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. And if this moment stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, take a second to like, subscribe, and drop 3 words in the comments that capture what this story meant to you.